Mesdames et messieurs,
the greatest festival of our contemporary society, the Olympic Games, is about to begin.
this is gonna be close.
Oh! They're all completely gassed! They've given it everything on the global bucket! Oh, yeah! Go! Oh!
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. But that is an Olympic championship.
Ready?
Hello, fans of TKFLASTAN, and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. I am your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello, how are you?
Hello! I have been watching lawn bowls and cricket and lots of things and cheering for Scotland.
So you have been watching Commonwealth Games.
I have been. And if people want to talk Commonwealth Games, lots happening on our Facebook group.
That is correct. I've not seen much Commonwealth Games at all beyond a little bit of opening ceremonies that listener Patrick posted in the Facebook group. But people are very excited and they're enjoying watching it.
And Duran was in the opening ceremonies, which made it all worthwhile.
No, it didn't, because the show version that I saw had like a tiny bit of Duran. Not enough Duran to please me.
It had a close-up of Simon Le Bon. My 13-year-old self's heart could not contain herself.
Well, you might be excited because we are talking to somebody from Scotland today.
I know.
So, contributor Ben Jackson is back with another interview for us, and he talked with Olympic modern pentathlete Jo Muir. Jo competed at Tokyo 2020 representing Team GB and took 14th place in the women's competition. She talked with Ben about her time in Tokyo, the changes to the modern pentathlon event that we'll see at Paris 2024, and the changes taking place to get the sport back onto the program for LA 2028. Take a listen.
So, Jo, I want to start with the 2020 Olympic Games and the run-up to that, right? We still call them the 2020 Games, even though they were 2021. What was it like in the run-up? You're getting ready to qualify. Maybe you had already qualified, and then the pandemic hits. And what was going through your mind as all of that was happening?
Yeah, it was a really stressful time. So in pentathlon, you get direct qualification at certain competitions, so you can qualify directly the year before the games. So either by coming top 8 at the European or at it depends on what continent you're from, but at the Continental Championships, by coming top 3 at the World Champs, or by winning the World Cup final. But it changes each cycle. But for Tokyo, the spots were only allocated to one person per nation. So if your teammate came first at Europeans and you came third, the spot would go to your teammate, which it didn't necessarily mean that that's who would be going. It just meant you'd qualified a spot for your country. So it's all very, very confusing. But basically, I hadn't qualified individually yet. So I started off 2020 season really well, and I won my first World Cup and won the previous competition before that. So I was in really, really good form. I'd always wanted to win a World Cup medal. So to win gold was amazing. And I was really, really ready to sort of get my teeth into it, do all I could to qualify. And then we heard all this stuff about a pandemic. Nobody really was sure what was going to happen. It was obviously like very different in like different countries. And to start with, obviously it was like in China, and you were hearing of people bringing it over, and it was all quite stressful. But we just carried on training. We had other World Cups coming up, had to just focus on that. And then it became a pandemic, obviously, and we all went into lockdown. To begin with, we were told that we'd be able to continue training because we'd have elite sport exemption. So we left on the Friday afternoon thinking, we'll see you all on Monday. On Monday, that was when the actual lockdown was announced in Britain. So we didn't go back to the training centre again for a good 3 months or so. But it was weird because we didn't know whether the Olympics was going to be going ahead in July, August, or if it was going to be postponed or cancelled. Like, nobody knew what was happening. So I think that was almost worse because we weren't able to train, but we had the Olympic Games in 4 5 months. So I think when the Olympics was actually postponed, it was a relief in a weird way. It was a strange feeling because I felt like I was in the best shape of my life, going sort of off the back of the start of the year, the way I started the year. But then it was also a huge relief because some nations were still able to train and we're just carrying on as usual. Whereas we literally, I don't know what it was like with you, but we had like sanctions put on, like when we were allowed to exercise, how much exercise we could do, or like leaving the house. So we were only allowed to do like leave the house once a day for an hour. So when you're trying to train for 5 different sports, it's quite challenging. But I was lucky enough, my parents live on a farm, and are farmers in Scotland. So I went up back home and I did loads of training around the farm, and me and my brother built a bit of a farm gym, which was great. But yeah, it was a really strange time. But I think in a way, like personally for me, I think that extra year just allowed me to like work on the things that I almost didn't have the time to work on before the pandemic. So I don't know whether it was like the kind of rehab stuff or like the prehab stuff, or just working on my streamline and swimming with lots of stretches, that kind of thing I was really able to work on during the lockdowns. And I think just as well, like matured as an athlete and as a person, and it all worked out in the end for me. Luckily, I was very fortunate.
So let's talk about this just as a quick reminder for people who may not be familiar. You mentioned you're training for 5 sports. Which 5 are you training for?
Yeah, so I do modern pentathlon. So it's running, swimming, shooting, horse riding, and fencing.
You were able to go out to the farm. You've got a little bit of space there. Did you have access to a pool? Were there people to fence with? Were there horses to ride?
Oh no, we were very much in isolation. So my brother went home as well. So there was like my parents, me and my brother, and yeah, I didn't fence again properly until October, because even when we came back to training, we weren't allowed to. It's obviously you can't really socially distance when you're fencing, so we weren't allowed to fence for such a long time. And horse riding, I grew up with horses. That was like my first sport that I got into, but unfortunately we don't have any on the farm anymore, so I wasn't able to ride. And I eventually started swimming in the river when things were a bit more lenient and you could like go out and do some extra sessions and things. So that was how I did my swim training. But yes, very different from swimming in a pool.
So which one of those is your favorite? Let me ask that first. Of those 5 sports, do you have a favorite, or is it just like I do them all because I'm in one big sport?
So my favorite's probably horse riding, because that was my number one, like sort of my first love. But it's also probably the most stressful in competition, because it's the one where you're not completely in control of the situation. You're obviously riding a horse and it's got its own brain, and each horse is very different, very individual. So yeah, there's part of it that's out with your control, no matter how talented a horse rider you are. But I think it also makes it exciting that there's that element in it. And I do love horse riding. And then I also love the laser run. So the running and the shooting is now combined. So you run in, you shoot your target, you have to get 5 green lights, and then you run. So it's actually just changed this year. It was 800-meter loops you would do. Now it's gone to 600 meters. So rather than we used to do 4 800s, we now do 5 600 meters. So that's also really exciting, and a lot can change in the laser run. It can really be determined by how you shoot, and as well as obviously your running ability. So those are my 2 faves.
The horse riding in modern pentathlon, though, you're not bringing your own horse to the competition.
No.
So you get a strange horse?
Yeah. So you get 20 minutes to get to know this horse, to get on it, do a few jumps. There's rules on how many jumps you're allowed to do and things. So you've got to be really quick at like getting a feel for the horse. Like I always try and get down early, and I'll just like try and bond with the horse a little bit, just so you have to trust the horse has to trust you, and 20 minutes is obviously not long to do that. So yeah, it is challenging, and yeah, you can ride some very different horses, but all of the horses go around the course already with their before the competition starts, with their grooms or their owners. So it's called like a test jump, so all the horses are able and are capable of doing the course.
I haven't been around horses a lot. I've been on horses a couple times. How wide a variety? Like, can you get like a grumpy horse or or excited horse or a happy horse? Like, how do you kind of do that and build that bond? Like you say, 20 minutes, that's not a lot of time.
Yeah, you can definitely get like all of those kinds of horses. You get some horses that are really forward going, they love to jump, but the issue with them is they might get a bit fast. If they get faster, their canter isn't as bouncy, so they might, we call it flat, and they get sort of flat, so they might knock more fences over. Then you get horses that are just a little bit stubborn, they might not want to be as keen for jumping. You really get a whole different variety. So I think it's just about when you get on the horse, I like to take it through lots of transitions, so walk to trot, trot to canter, canter to walk, that sort of thing. Just get it listening to you, get it listening to your leg. I never do too much in the warm-up. The horses are already warm, but I just want to sort of create that bond with the horse, and then we'll do a few jumps so you kind of have a feel for the jump as well. And yeah, then you go for it. I think like quite often like we'll use our voice for like encouragement, and obviously just like patting the horse and things like that as well. Yeah.
You don't show up with like lumps of sugar first or anything like
Sometimes some polos.
that. So you qualify, or you've qualified, you've locked down, you're getting ready to go. It's 2021 at this point. Had you been vaccinated by that point?
So I qualified through the ranking list.
Okay.
So 6 spots go to the ranking list, although it always ends up being more. It depends how everyone's qualified. But I qualified through the ranking list. So kind of found out, it would have been around about like the 16th of June, 2021, I found out that I was going to the Olympics. So that's not at that stage I had my first vaccine, so we were really, really fortunate, and we got kind of like fast tracked for a vaccine. So we were really lucky. So I'd had one vaccine, was getting my other vaccine in a week or so's time, so was fully vaccinated when we went to Tokyo. I'm not sure, I'm feeling you maybe, actually I might be wrong in saying it, I don't know if you did have to be, but it was obviously like very strict around COVID, and it was obviously so serious, so we had to be like really sensible. So yeah, qualified, and then I think it got almost more stressful because it was something like that I'd been working for my whole adult life, and COVID was so rife in England at the time, and yeah, like things were opening up, lockdowns were easing, so people were starting to go out. I think they got rid of, like, it wasn't compulsory to wear a mask, and all of these things happened sort of 3 weeks before we were going to leave for Tokyo, and the cases just spiked, and we knew if we got it, then it was game over, and like we wouldn't have been able to go to the Olympics. So it was just a case of being so careful. We really just isolated ourselves away, like me and my partner who I live with. I think it was an absolute nightmare because I was not letting him do anything because I was obviously worried, but he was great and very supportive and things. And yeah, and it was just in the training centre as well, because we trained with some students, people of all different ages. So it was kind of like they got told, if you're here and training, then you can't be going out, you can't be going to the pub for dinner, whatever it was. It's like you're here as a training partner for these guys going to the Olympics. So it was pretty strict, but luckily it was all fine. and we all made it to the start line in Tokyo.
So what was it like getting into Tokyo and into that Olympic Village? Were they testing you? What was it like for you guys?
Yeah, so we had testing. It was a month before we left, we had to do a test, 2 weeks before we left, and then a week before we left. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that. But then in the last 2 weeks before we left, every single day we had to do one of the lateral flows, so one of the rapid tests every day. Then when we arrived, we had a PCR test, and then every morning we would have to do a PCR test. So yeah, it was like strict, and we weren't allowed to leave the Olympic Village or leave the holding camp before we got in. It was only like if it was scheduled to do so. So when we went to the training venue or if we went to the competition venue, but you weren't allowed to just go and wander around the streets of Tokyo.
Did you have some time to train once you got there and get adjusted, and even just the time change and everything else?
It was over a week before we competed. So I think we went out on the Monday and we were competing the following Thursday. So we stayed at the holding camp until the Sunday. So we were there for like 5, I think, with the time difference and everything. We were there for about 5 days at the holding camp. So Team GB holding camp, all the other Team GB athletes that hadn't competed or hadn't gone into the village yet were all training there as well, or staying there. And then we would train at the university, so Keio University. So yeah, we had the opportunity to train, which was really good. We had amazing facilities out there, and like the hotel and everything was great. We've all felt very well looked after. But yeah, it was surreal as well, because so when I got to the training camp, it wasn't even like we were in the village yet, but you would see these British athletes that you've seen on TV and you've always looked up to, and they'd just be there like having dinner next to you, and you'd all be chatting, and it was just such a surreal experience. You just had to pinch yourself and be like, oh my goodness, I'm really here.
And so you made it. And am I remembering this right? Was it crazy hot in Tokyo during the competition? I seem to remember like it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, no, it was hot. So we had prepared before we left. So we'd been doing heat sort of acclimatization. So for the 2 weeks before we left, we were in these portable greenhouses, going on the bike, just trying to get used to the temperatures, and like there's obviously science behind it, and it's trying to increase your capability to sweat. So it was all like monitored and stuff, but we'd done that before we left. But then I don't think anything can prepare you for just like how muggy it was.
Okay.
Because it was sunny some days, but it was just so humid. But we were fortunate when we competed, well, the laser run, which is the thing that's the longest and you're outside, it was about 7 o'clock in the evening that we did it, so it was dark, so the sun had gone away, so it was still hot, but it wasn't like anything ridiculous.
So how does it compare to the heat wave you guys are having now?
Honestly, we were all saying that. To be fair, it was last week, but we were like, I don't think it was this hot in Tokyo.
Wow.
Like honestly, it was so relentless last week.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about the competition then. How was it? You get to the start line and it's time to go. You're doing all the events in one day, is that right?
So we fenced the day before, so we did our fencing ranking round the day before, and then we do everything the next day as well. So we have what's called a fencing bonus round. So the main day starts, so we've already fenced, then the next day we start with the swim, then we have the fencing bonus round, then we have the ride, and then we finish with the laser run. So yeah, that was kind of like the format of the day.
Okay.
So the previous day when we'd fenced, fencing has always been the one that I've struggled with the most and I've had to like really work at. And all season my fencing had been going well. I felt like I'd had a breakthrough, and I don't know what happened at the Olympics, but my fence was so poor, and it was like almost back to my old ways of fencing, and I was so disappointed because I think I finished the fencing like 33rd out of 36, so I was right down at the bottom.
Okay.
And I'd gone into the Olympics ranked 6th in the world, and I knew it was going to be so hard to get myself back up into like the top 6 or 8 at the Olympics. And I mean, my goal was to win a medal. I think everyone wants to go and like try and win a medal, and I definitely believe that I could have if everything had gone right on the day. But yeah, I don't know whether it was like the pressure, if it was we hadn't done as much fencing when we got out there. I'm really not sure, but something just didn't click on the day of the fence. But I think in a pentathlon you don't know what's going to happen, and I knew there was such a long day ahead of us the next day, and I was like, I'm going to just fight till the end, try and make up as many places. So in the end, I came 14th, which was disappointing, but the whole experience was amazing, and I don't want to think negatively about it too much. And yeah, it was amazing just getting to the Olympics and things. So yeah, I would have loved to have won a medal, but it wasn't to be.
I want to ask you about that part of it, because about that variability of pentathlon, which is you get a strange horse. If you get a good horse, great. If you get a bad horse, that could cause a lot of problems. Everybody is training in 5 sports, so everybody's going to have strong areas and weak areas. When you're fencing everybody else, right, in the competition. Does it feel like as a competitor, there's a big element of luck to some of this? Or do you feel like if I train well enough and I plan well enough, I can kind of control the variables?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can definitely like control them. There might be like occasionally it's completely out with your control, and like, I don't know, you might just draw a horse who's had a really bad experience in the first round and it just decides it's not going to go. And I think that's a really difficult one, because you've not done anything to affect the horse. Like, the horse could go round. It's tricky. So there is that. But I think if you kind of look at the results, and like, it's sort of all down to consistency, and it's kind of, you always see the same people at the top. And yeah, once in a blue moon someone might have a bad competition, but I think the top athletes all kind of get results.
They sort of figure it
not.
out.
So yeah, so it kind of like, I think there are a lot of things you have to get right, but I think if you're like prepared enough, then yeah, you can do it.
So I want to ask you about the future of the sport now, and things are changing. And in Paris, they're trying to tighten it up even more, right? It's going to be faster, more together.
Yeah, so they've actually started the new format already. So previously, like you said, it was all done over a day, and I think in Tokyo it was all in like the afternoon, so it was quite spread out. So I think we started at say 1ish, we finished at 7, so it's a long day for spectators to sit and watch that. So they're now condensing it, so you've already done your fencing ranking round. So this is just at the Olympics and at our World Cup final. So you've done your fencing ranking round. There's 36 athletes. You all fence one another, so the same as before. But then you get split into 2 semi-finals. So there'll be semi-final A, semi-final B. So it's all done. I think it's on your world ranking, but don't quote me on that. It might be done on the fencing position. I've not quite figured it out yet, because I've actually only done the new format once. But they're meant to be pretty fair. And then you start with the ride. So you get an hour's general warm-up. You then begin with the ride. Then you have your fencing bonus round. Then you swim, and then you laser run. So it's different order, still finishing with the laser run, but the main difference is you've only got about 10-15 minutes between each event. So depending on where you are, so we go in reverse order for the ride. So if you actually had a bad fence, you've then got a little bit more time to prepare for the bonus round, rather than if you've had a really good fence. And it sort of works like that through the competition. So I think they're hoping that the competition is finished in like 2 hours.
Okay.
Which will be, and it's really good to watch. Like, it's just quicker, and you're not sort of sitting twiddling your thumbs for a while waiting on the competition. So no, I think it's exciting. It's just, I think trying to, because in our World Cups we then have a qualification round before that, so there's quite a lot of rounds and it can get slightly confusing, but I think once everyone's got like the gist of it, I think it will be really positive.
So how hard is that going to be for the athletes, though, to sandwich all of that into that tight of a time?
Yeah, it's definitely tough, and like we've never had to do transitions or anything before, so we would run, we might have like half an hour, we'd swim, we'd have our lunch, chill out for a couple of hours, have a fencing lesson. Like we were never on like, there was never any time pressure to it. Whereas now we've started training like transition. So we'll do a swim and then we'll go straight into the run. And yeah, it's just like training and making sure you're robust enough to be able to handle that. So I think that's really important, because I think there's a lot more like risk of injury and things. And it's also just sussing out like pacing and things. So I think the question is, it's like, do you want to swim a max 200 in 15 minutes time? You're going to be having to try and shoot 4 centimeter diameter circle like from 10 meters. Like, is that optimal for performance, or is it better to maybe swim at 90% of effort and then hopefully the shooting will be better? Some people, maybe it doesn't affect them, so they might be able to manage to shoot really well and run really well off a max swim, but others might struggle. So I think there's a lot of learning to do just to suss this all out. It's just a shame that there's only 3 years, or there was 3 years to do that in between rather than 4.
Right. Well, so does this mean then, I imagine the sport was always strategic and the athletes always had to know themselves well, but does this change the strategy or the way that athletes have to approach the strategy and what they have to know about themselves, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I think nutrition has always played a part, like a big part, but I think it's now more important than ever, because you need to really suss out like your nutrition strategy, your hydration strategy. Then in between the rounds, it's like your recovery strategy as well. So I'm doing the fencing round on the Monday, the semi-final on the Tuesday, I've got to rest on the Wednesday, and then the final on the Thursday. Like, how am I going to make sure I get to the final, but then I'm recovered so that I can give it my all in the final? So definitely, and I think it is at the moment, I think it's just kind of like trial and error and trying different strategies and training, see what works best and going from there.
Have you guys been calling the triathlon people to ask about transitions?
I'm not personally, but I think like our team have been like, but I mean, their transitions are like in 30 seconds.
Right.
We don't have anything like that to contend with, but yeah, we can definitely learn from other sports as well.
So Paris, then that's our next one, and it's going to be tighter. And then beyond that, there's talk of more changes to pentathlon. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about what's happening with that. Maybe getting rid of the horses, maybe adding an obstacle course, but you're already running and shooting. Do you have any thoughts about what pentathlon will look like, and maybe what versus what it should look like?
Yeah, so personally, I come from a horse riding background, and that's what got me into the sport. So I'm really sad about the decision to remove horse riding. However, they had to change something. If they were going to keep riding, they need to change something. I think the riding has been an issue for a number of years, and we've always said, sort of in Britain, and my mum was a horse rider and things as well, so we've always had conversations and ways that we thought that they could change the horse riding, make it fairer, make the standard higher, and they've changed. So there's like the UIPM, who are like international governing body, that they've changed other sports, but they've never done anything with the ride. And then it's now got to this stage where rather than trying to reform the riding, it's almost easier to remove the riding. And I just think that's the history of our sport. Like, it's the story that it's meant to emulate the all-round athlete and a soldier or a cavalry officer going to war and all the things he had to do to get there, sort of thing. So I think it definitely is sad because horse riding is part of the history of pentathlon. But yeah, like I said, they do need to change it. But I've not personally tried the obstacle course race, so I feel like I don't have any opinion on it because I've heard good things, I've heard bad things. I don't know. I think there should be another running race? Probably not. Like, we've already got our laser run. I think an obstacle course race would create a completely different type of athlete, because we're going to be getting athletes who are really strong, like who've got really strong upper bodies. Typically, I mean, there isn't like a sort of one size fits all for pentathlon. We've got very different types of bodies, but I think typically we're not that strong in our upper bodies. So I think that will definitely change if obstacle course racing does come in. And I am worried about the future of pentathlon and its place in the Olympic programme, because at the moment it's currently not in the programme for LA. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's going to be decided until like the beginning of next year. And it's a real worry. Me and my teammates and all the staff, like, that's our life and it's what we've always done. So yeah, it's worrying, and I just really hope that they make the right decision and we manage to stay.
You said you've thought about what you would do to reform the riding. What would you do to reform the riding?
So I think there needs to be much tougher checks on riding ability. So in Britain, we have to get a riding certificate. So we have to have our riding instructor, Jabina, she has to go around and she signs it if she thinks that you're capable of riding. But she's pretty harsh. Like, she won't give you a certificate unless she knows you can. Whereas I do think in other countries, I don't know if any other countries have that, but I think you get people who are really good at 4 of the disciplines and they think of it as a triathlon and maybe don't put the effort into the ride. And I just think there needs to be, since the Olympics, there has been like some tougher rules and things. And I think now apparently if you get like eliminated in 2 competitions back to back, you get a sort of ban for 60 days. So you're not allowed to ride for that long until you've like sorted it out. But I just think there's so much more that could be done. And they've lowered the jumping height, which like I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but I think by lowering it, you're maybe encouraging bad riding because you don't have to be as sort of talented at riding. But I think it's really tricky. I think they need to be stricter in the warm-up arena as well, and they definitely have been this year. I think there's a lot that we could take from the FEI, which is the equestrian governing body, and some of their rules and things, but it definitely has got better this year. They've got stricter in reducing the number of stops before you get eliminated and things. But yeah, I think there's definitely like more you could do.
And that elimination, does it eliminate an athlete from the competition completely?
So you score 0 in the ride, so you can still do the laser run, but you're not gonna be in contention for any sort of result.
Yeah. Okay, is that too much? Then does that make the horses kind of too much of a wild card? Should people be able to maybe bring their own horse?
It's tricky because I think pentathlon has sort of previously maybe been brushed as like an elitist sport, and you've got to have money to get into it, and you've got to go to private school, which is completely untrue. Like, I didn't go to a private school. I grew up on a farm in a very normal family. But I think if it was you were bringing your own horse, or you had to have your own horse, I think it then really makes it not accessible to as many people. And I don't know, like I don't know, it's just the argument about money and things. So it is a tricky one. I think as well, like, we should be able to have longer with the horse to warm up. So maybe like when we arrive on the first day of competition, you meet the horse you're going to ride and you can get to know it better, and then the horse trusts you more as well.
That makes sense. Sure. So I want to ask you about 2 other things sort of related to that. One is, do you think laser run could be its own sport?
Yeah, I think it could. And it's got its own world championships now. It's a really, really fun sport. I think if you haven't tried it, you should definitely give it a go. It's just like you can get people who are really good at shooting or really good at running or good at both. So I don't know when, and you could be doing really well and then you could have a bad shoot, and it just changes so much. Like you just have to stay so focused, and it's really fun. Laser shooting is great fun. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your pictures on Instagram and I've seen some of the stuff posted, and it's like, I want to find one of these events. It looks like a great time.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I don't know in America, I'm not sure what the pentathlon website's called, but there'll be like Pentathlon America, and I'm sure they've got like information on it and where you can do it and things.
Yeah.
And I know you can like hire the guns, like they'll provide guns and things at the competitions. So no, it's really worth a go.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about this, I listened to your interview on the Other 99% podcast, and you mentioned something, and I'm going to ask a follow-up question from another interview, because I wanted to ask you about this. I wanted them to ask you about this, which is, you talked about being part of a team, and you've mentioned being part of a team in this conversation. And even though you're competing as an individual, how important is it that you're part of that team that goes to the Olympics, for example? Like, what does that mean for you?
Oh, being part of a team is hugely important. Like, yeah, it's an individual sport, but I have a huge team around about me. Like, it wouldn't have been possible without the team. So without all of this support staff, all of the coaches, so support staff, I mean like the S&C, nutritionists, physios, doctors, psychologists, like all of those people. And then as well, my teammates, my fellow athletes. Like, I think we're all obviously trying to get the most out of our own bodies as we can, but we push each other on, we support one another, we all want the best for one another, and it's like really healthy competition. So I think it's like hugely important. And yeah, I always think of it sort of as a team sport almost rather than an individual. And then like going back to like what you said at the Olympics, and I think being part of like Team GB was just huge for me. That's like one of the greatest teams in the world, and you have all these athletes from all the different sports, different ages. Like, I can't actually remember, there's like the youngest athlete was like 13 or 14, the oldest was in his 60s or 50s or something. Like, you've got such a range of people, but you're all competing, you're all there as one team, and I just love that.
And so to come back to this notion of the team and then also the pandemic, when I was watching stuff and trying to follow modern pentathlon up to Tokyo, I found the Team GB Power of Five videos and the Workout of the Week videos that you were leading. So I trained with you during the pandemic, whether you know it or not. How did those come about?
I think it was, we had ideas. It was like before the pandemic that we really wanted to try and like do more with the social media and get the athletes involved. And then it was kind of the perfect time because the pandemic hit, and we were like, okay, now is a really good chance. So yeah, it was one of the girls that works in the office, Emily. She was like really behind it, and she was emailing us and asking if anyone wanted to be part of the videos. So yeah, I enjoy doing stuff like that. So it was good fun. And yeah, it was nice as well because each week you would see a different athlete doing it. And it was nice that everyone kind of got on board.
And did you design the Word of the Week workouts? Can I blame you for all the times when I said, why more burpees?
I did not put burpees in that. I would not have been putting burpees in that. I don't even think I knew how to do a burpee when I was doing those. So that was not me, but I apologize on whoever it was.
Well, no, they were great fun. I mean, those were wonderful. It was great to kind of have that. And you've kind of continued to lead virtual workouts, right?
Yeah. So last year after the games, I did my Pilates qualification, so my Pilates mat work qualification. So I've started teaching Pilates. I've been teaching since January online, and I love it. It's great. It's just so nice to have something else to focus on and not just pentathlon. I felt like for so long that was kind of my whole life was revolved around that, and I think it's really healthy to have that balance. So it's really nice being able to put my time and effort into Pilates as well as into my training, and I really think it complements my training so well. It's kind of some of the things that my physio gives me, I'm like, this is literally what I'm giving like my clients in Pilates. Like, it's all of the prehab stuff that I've got to do to make sure I'm robust and not going to get injured. It's all the core stuff that we do before swimming in our pre-pool warm-ups, and yeah, it's just so good. And I think as well for your mind, as when you're doing a Pilates practice, you're just really focusing on that like movement and on your breath work, and you're just completely clearing your mind, because I think we're all so busy now thinking of the next thing or on our phones or looking at screens, and it's so nice just to be able to empty your mind and just think about your body and what's actually going on in the here and now. So yeah, I love it. And I've been spent the afternoon earlier before I spoke to you just looking at some venues. I'm hoping to start teaching in-person classes in Bath in October. So yeah, it's exciting. But I teach on a Tuesday night, so 7 p.m. British time. So I'm not sure what the time difference is, but for anyone that is interested, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a link to my social media.
Okay. Yeah, no, we'll put the link in. That'll be great. It's amazing what we can do now and what the pandemic taught us to do, right? With that whole sort of let's shift to online and thinking about new ways to learn and to interact. So
oh yeah, absolutely. And it's great just being able to do it from your living room, not having to go anywhere. I mean, it is amazing going to a class and all working out together, but yeah, it's a great alternative.
So a couple more questions here. You mentioned this just a second ago about getting a break from the screens. And one of the things that you did right in Tokyo, I remember, was you posted something, I think it was on Instagram, where you said, I'm taking a social media break, guys. I'll see you after the games. How important is that for you as an athlete to say, you know what? Now is the time I've really got to focus, or maybe I need to get away from these screens, or maybe I need to get away from the crazies that are bugging me about doing a podcast on social media. I mean, what was the thinking behind that break? And do you think that maybe people should do that a little bit more often?
Yeah, no, I think it was really important. I've had like little, I call them social media cleanses before, because yeah, I think if we're always on social media, like one, we're always comparing ourselves to others, and we're not in the moment when we're busy scrolling through our news feed. So yeah, I just try not to like use it too much. And I think at the Olympics especially, it was almost overwhelming. It was really good, and it was amazing, the support. And afterwards I was up until like 3 a.m. like reading messages of support and things. But I just, before the Olympics, I just couldn't deal with that. Like, it was overwhelming because I never experienced anything like it. So I really, really appreciated it all. And I read every single message after and replied to every single message. But just, yeah, before I needed to just focus on my competition. I would have been up for hours the night before if I was like replying to everyone. So just needed to like focus on the competition and just get my head in gear and not be doing it for the wrong reasons or be doing it for Instagram or whatever it was. So yeah, I think it was the right decision.
And do you think that people should maybe do those social media cleanses from time to time?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I don't know, we had like some friends at the weekend, and then my cousin stayed for a few days, and like I realized I hadn't been on Instagram for like 4 or 5 days, and I was like, it's actually really nice, like just being with friends and like actually having conversations and not being behind the screen.
Yeah.
And I do think it's really sad, like when you're kind of like walking into town and everyone's looking at their phone and no one's just like looking around and looking at the nice weather or the views. So I think it can do us all good. I think yeah, even if it's just like reducing it for on your commute into work or whatever it is, reading a book instead. I think it's important.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more question here, which is, if you were going to create a pentathlon,
Oh,
what would it be? What 5 events would be in Jo's pentathlon?
oh, that's a good question. I'd have laser run.
Okay.
I'd have riding. So laser run, I guess, is like the shooting and running. I would have swimming as well, I think. And I'd probably have cycling just because I quite like cycling. I'd probably do away with fencing.
Do away with fencing. Oh, that's the best
Me and
part.
fencing just don't get on. We have a love-hate relationship. Sometimes we get on, sometimes not so much.
Okay. Is there anything else that you think that people should know about pentathlon or the future, or anything else that we haven't talked about that you would want to talk about?
Oh gosh, I feel that's a very open question. Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I might just say that it's been in the Olympic Games, so in the Olympic program since 1912, and it was created by Pierre de Coubertin, who was the founder of the modern Olympics. So I just think that it's really important to kind of hold on to that history and like remember that, and like hopefully it will continue to be in the Olympic program in years to come. But it's just worrying at the moment, like with what's happening. But yeah, that's probably it.
Okay. Are you still doing the charity work? Do you want to talk about that at all?
So I'm still an ambassador for Dorothy House. I haven't been there for ages. Like after the pandemic, it got like really strict, obviously, with like people visiting because it's a hospice, so it cares for people with life-limiting illnesses. So obviously they have to be super careful. But I've done like the last thing I did for them was a little video promoting some of the events that they run in schools and things. So I really liked helping out, and it's such a great charity, and it's obviously in the local community and stuff. And yeah, no, I would like to get more involved again and try and get up there and see them.
And how did you choose that?
I actually got approached by a friend of mine, and they were looking for ambassadors, and he was like, would you be interested in this? And I was like, yeah, definitely. So yeah, kind of that's how it started.
Okay. Jo, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jo and Ben. Follow Jo on Insta at Jo Muir _194 and at poised _Pilates. It hadn't occurred to me that the new format for Paris 2024 makes it more like a triathlon with transition times.
Right, because they're speeding everything up and you don't have the leisurely pace of certainly 20 or 30 years ago where it was over multiple days. But even what we saw in Tokyo over a couple days, this is get those shoes off, kid.
Right. That does make me excited to see what it will be like at Paris, because the speeding it up, it does really, as Jo said, make you think about strategy a whole lot more. And how do you attack each event? And that's going to be really cool, I think.
I just like the image of Jo training in the pond or the river for her swimming before Tokyo. Welcome to TKFLASTAN.
It is the time in the show when we check in with our team Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests of the show who are now citizens of our country, TKFLASTAN. Starting off with some beach volleyball, Kelly Claes Cheng and her partner Betsy Flint are playing in a bunch of tournaments on tour. This past weekend, they were in Fort Lauderdale, where they made it to the semifinals of the AVP tour there. Next up, they are going to Atlanta this coming weekend. Kelly is currently ranked first on the AVP tour in aces, second in kills, and third in terminal blocks.
Jayson Terdiman has officially retired from luge, but has joined USA Luge as junior national team coach.
Yay! And get well soon to Superfan Sarah, who has COVID.
Not cool.
Not cool. We're very sorry to hear that, and hope you are feeling better soon. Little bit of Paris 2024 news. The budget has increased, writes Ed Dixon in Sports Pro. The initial budget for Paris when they got the games in 2018 was 6.8 billion euros, which is just about the same in dollars. And now it is 8.3 billion euros, and that is likely to increase because of higher costs for construction and increased security. Meanwhile, they keep moving venues around like crazy.
They keep moving venues. They keep eliminating places. Oh, we're not going to build this temporary venue. We're just going to use this shack in Pierre's backyard.
Are you talking about the new media center?
I am talking about the new media center. So yes, the proposed media center, which would have been the not broadcast journalists' workroom, was going to be a temporary facility. And now they are using a much smaller convention center.
It'll be interesting to see how that turns out because they are quite the distance from each other. So I don't know. We'll see how it works for us. I'd love to see when these venues are finalized, to be quite honest.
Right. Are they just going to keep changing this with each cost? Oh, we're not going to be able to build that. We'll have to do this. Are we just going to eliminate whole things?
Don't know. Some better news, though. France24.com had an update on the Notre Dame Cathedral restoration project. Because as you may remember, in 2018, the spire of the cathedral and the roof were destroyed. And Culture Minister Rima Abdul Malak has said that the cleanup phase of the restoration project is done and rebuilding will get underway at the end of the summer. So the cathedral should be reopened in time for 2024 games.
Jill, I know you're from Indiana, but it's Notre Dame.
Anyway, I'm not changing it. Today I'm feeling feisty. I'm not changing my pronunciation.
I wasn't asking you to change your pronunciation. I just wanted to make sure we got that on the record.
All right. Well,
Jacques will, when you're in his backyard, he may say, Mon Dieu, we do not say that.
Let's give a big shout out to our Patreon patrons who keep our flame alive. And maybe if you're a Patreon patron, let us know. Do you want me saying Notre Dame? Notre Dame. I know it makes me sound like a yokel when I say Notre Dame, but that's how it rolled off the tongue today.
And for Patreon patrons who want to get in on it, we have China stories and Beijing stories that you have not heard. And Jill even kept it from me.
Yes, our bonus episode for Patreon patrons this month is all about one of the China souvenirs that I'd forgotten and decided to look into because it was quite mysterious. So if you would like to find out more about Patreon patronage, check out patreon.com/flamealivepod. That is going to do it for this week. Let us know your thoughts about the changes to modern pentathlon.
And you can get in touch with us by email at flamealivepod@gmail.com. Call or text us at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. Our social handle is at flamealivepod. And as I mentioned, be sure to join the Keep the Flame Alive podcast group on Facebook.
Next week, we are going to have on author David Marinus, who you may remember from our book club episode on Rome 1960. He's going to talk with us about his new biography called Path Lit by Lightning, The Life of Jim Thorpe. So this is very exciting. We've had his son Andrew on, and we're excited to have David on as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and until then, keep the flame alive.